Welcome back, movie lovers. This story starts with Jaslyn. We see her shopping for a home security camera for her new home that her and her husband Bryce had just bought. She's holding an Aura security camera while watching an advertisement on the shop television about the Aura security camera. She is contemplating buying it. It's the equivalent of a Ring camera. She's looking at the price and notices it's $200. While she's trying to decide if she will buy one or not, another shopper notices her looking at the price and says to her it's cheap. He says although it looks expensive, it's a bargain and that it's the best money he has ever spent. That he and his wife now sleep like babies knowing that there is a camera to catch any unwanted activity in or around his home. I agree. You cannot put a price on your safety. Those little cameras have saved many lives and solved many crimes. He goes on to tell her that if you got a knock at your door 50 years ago, you'd be happy and delighted to go answer while not knowing who was on the other side of the door, as it was safer times back then. But if you hear an unexpected knock at your door nowadays, it could be someone trying to hurt you. We sure are living in different times, my friends. She ends up buying it. She returns to her beautiful home in a gated community and does a little unpacking with her husband Bryce. He notices she bought the Aura camera and thinks it's a little silly that she spend $200 on a camera in such a safe area where it's gated and security guards monitor everyone who enters through the gate. And he says there aren't even any porch pirates in their neighborhood. They are the worst. Stop stealing other people's shit, guys. She says that she'll put the $200 back into their budget plan when her online jewelry shop goes live in a few days' time. He then goes on to say that he's sorry and that he understands why she bought it, and says that what happened to her when she was a child must have been a terrifying nightmare, and that he can't imagine what it must have been like. He goes on to give a little speech, but she jokingly says that she needs her husband, not Tony Robbins, so he laughs and doesn't continue his speech. So now as the viewer, we start to understand that something awful obviously happened to her as a child. So that's why she feels worried about her home safety or lack thereof. I'm not a fan of her husband's character, honestly. I feel like he mocks her feelings and decisions a lot. I mean, honestly, it's not even that big of a deal that she wanted to buy a camera for her front door. Everyone should have a home security camera. You have to be vigilant at all times. There are real monsters out there just waiting to catch someone off guard and harm them. Bryce was deeping it way too much. Later in bed, Jaslyn lays and is daydreaming about what happened 20 years earlier. We see her as a little kid in bed one night, and she is woken up by a man in her room wearing a white mask walking towards her. My God, could you imagine seeing that as a child? Something similar happened to me once, actually. I was woken up from my sleep by hearing my bedroom door being opened. It was pitch black, so I knew the person couldn't see my face. He couldn't see me staring at him. I kept staring at his silhouette, hoping that he wouldn't attack me. So many thoughts were running through my head. I kept thinking what I would do if he attacked me. But then my roommate comes into my room screaming at him. Turns out it was her ex-boyfriend who was stoned to pieces looking for a place to stay after a night out with his friends. I guess he was too far from his home and just decided to break in to have a good sleep. Ridiculous. Later he said he was shocked to see me in the spare room. He didn't know his ex-girlfriend had gotten a new roommate. It's kind of funny now to think about it, but my God, at the time I didn't know what was going to happen. My point is, if we had a camera similar to Aura, we would have been alerted to that guy breaking into our apartment. Thank God he was harmless, but it could have easily been someone else who had broken in and hurt us. Anyway, back to the story. As the creepy intruder is walking towards her, she covers her head with her blanket, and then hears her mom screaming, "Who are you?" Then gunshots fire. This flashback seems to imply it was a home invasion, but it's never really made clear as to what actually happened that night. Then she snaps out of her daydreaming. Over the next few days, Jaslyn and Bryce do some more unpacking. Bryce sets up the Aura camera. They do some house painting and decorating. Jaslyn gets excited about her online shop making money through sales. Love that for her. By the way, I love her style. She wears the cutest outfits. Bryce's pager goes off, so he has to leave immediately for work. He tells Jaslyn not to wait up as he is probably going to be gone all night. While she's doing some work on her online shop at her desk, her alert for her Aura camera goes off saying that someone is at her door, but when she checks the camera, no one is there. Creepy. She then goes to check outside to see if anyone is there. As if. Don't ever do something that silly, guys. Never ever open your door if you're home alone and your camera says someone is at your door, but yet you can't see them. No way. She goes outside and gets startled by raccoons going through her rubbish, so she assumes that it was the raccoons who alerted her security camera. Later that night, as she's getting ready for bed, her Aura camera alerts goes off again. She looks at the video and there is a creepy, worried-looking man standing there saying, "Hello, Jaslyn, open the door." Could you imagine? She asks him what he wanted. He tells her that he needs to see her and to please open the door. She shouts at him to leave right away. He keeps on banging at the door while saying, "Let me in. You need to let me in right now and not be afraid of me." Sure guy. She tells him she's calling the police. They arrive and soon after her husband arrives too. But the police can't really help her because the video has disappeared off of her phone. Their neighbor across the street comes in to ask if everything is okay. He tells them that he has a camera over his garage and asks if they want a copy of the footage. They go over to his house, but after checking it, they see that there is no creepy man in sight on his video. On his camera footage, it just shows Jaslyn by herself going outside, then going back into her house. She is so confused. The cops clearly don't believe her. They ask her if it's possible that she fell asleep and had a nightmare. She gets frustrated and says she knows the difference between a dream and something that actually happened. Later that night, her husband says he thinks the cops were right, and that her thinking she saw someone could be due to all the stress they have been going through lately, with his new job, with her new online business and them moving house. Very stressful time in their lives. He asks if she thinks it was a dream. She then goes on to say that she does feel stressed and that she can't stop thinking about the man in her room that night all those years ago, that seeing her parents tied up haunts her. And maybe her moving to a new house is triggering some nightmares, so she thinks that maybe she did dream about the creepy man at the door. She said it definitely had to be a dream since he wasn't caught on camera. The next day, while they are watching television, Bryce jokes about killing the raccoons that was in their rubbish the day before and says that they won't alert the camera anymore. She gets annoyed with him and said that he didn't have to kill the poor raccoons, that they were minding their own business. I agree with you, Jaslyn. Why kill the poor thing? As they are arguing about it, her Aura camera alert goes off and she's shocked to see the man from the night before at her door again. She's shocked because she had convinced herself it was a dream. She shows her husband and he's shocked too. So the husband angrily answers the Aura call and asks what he wants. But the guy keeps saying, "Jaslyn, sweet Jaslyn." Bryce tells him to get the F away from their house. The man insists that he needs to see Jaslyn immediately. Bryce grabs a fire poker and was going outside to confront the man, but Jaslyn stops him and says that something is off, that this feels weird and to not go outside. He then calls the neighbor across the street and asks him if his camera is picking up anyone outside their home right now. The neighbor says no, that there is no one at their door. Yet both Jaslyn and Bryce are literally looking at him on their camera. Terrifying. So Bryce barges out the front door, but of course there is no one there. A very confused Bryce is then absolutely convinced that it's the Aura app, that some basement-dwelling hacker has somehow hacked their Aura camera and is pranking them. But Jaslyn is adamant that it's not a prank, because when she was alone the night before, she literally heard the man's voice through the door and saw him turning the door knob handle trying to get in, that there is no way it's hackers. He tells her that there is no other explanation, and to Google Aura pranks, that things like this happen all the time. The next day she Googles it and sees a disturbing video that a woman had posted of a guy saying some disgusting things to her. She shows her husband, but he's still convinced it's a prank, and says he rebooted the system and changed the password so no more hackers can get in. Jaslyn then tells him that she realized something about their Aura camera visitor, that when she was in high school they had this janitor called Mr. Hendricks, who was very odd and was always talking to himself. One day she said good morning to him, and while trying to make her friends laugh, she told Mr. Hendricks that he looked nice. Kind of mean, don't be like that, guys. But he took her seriously and became a bit obsessed, and from then on he was always looking at her for way too long and smiling. And he'd also put candy in her locker. In school she kept finding little notes in her school book saying to my sweet Jaslyn. She was sure that the notes were from Mr. Hendricks. Then one day he just disappeared from their school. She is now convinced that it was him on the Aura camera. Again, her husband doesn't believe her. Frustrating. She says it has to be him because the guy at the door kept saying my sweet Jaslyn, the same thing that the janitor would leave in her books in high school. Later we see her trying to find Mr. Hendricks. She goes to his sister's house and pretends that she works at the school her brother used to work at all those years ago. She tells her that she's arranging a reunion for the Alumni Association and that she couldn't find Mr. Hendricks, and she said she wanted him there alongside with some of the old staff and that they'd all love to see him. Mr. Hendricks' sister said she would love to help, but she has no clue where he is and she hasn't seen him in a few months. She said that one day he just got up and left and didn't tell her where he was going. She sees a picture of him and now knows that it was in fact him at her door. She tells Bryce and he finally believes her. That sure took a while, Bryce. Later that night, while home alone, Mr. Hendricks comes back to her door and once again insists that he needs to see her and begs her to let him in. She asks him what will happen if she opens the door. He says don't be afraid, that he just needs to see her, that's all. She opens the door to let him in, but sees that he's gone. When she goes back inside, he's standing there in the dark. She starts screaming, but he stands there looking sad and politely thanks her for letting him in. Then he says that he's sorry because he lied to her. When he said that, I really thought he was going to hurt her. But no, he didn't. He said that he wasn't just there to see her. He was there to tell her something too, that he was sorry. She is confused and asks him what he is sorry about. He says for what he did in high school, that back then he convinced himself that he loved her and didn't know how to handle it. He apologized if he had ever made her feel scared or unsafe, and all he wanted was to say sorry. Then she starts telling him that she is sorry too, that she wasn't the nicest person in high school and apologized for being mean to him sometimes. And she suggests that they forgive each other. The look on Mr. Hendricks' face is kind of sad, honestly. He looks relieved and looks like the weight of the world is off his shoulders. He starts to laugh and falls to his knees, then disappears into thin air. Jaslyn can't believe her eyes as she just stands there watching Mr. Hendricks disappear. The next day, while watching the news, she sees that a missing person case has been solved, that a man called Mr. Dale Hendricks has been found unalived. He was found floating in a river, and it was presumed that he had unalived himself weeks prior to the discovery of his body. So she knows for sure that she was talking to his spirit who was trying to right his wrongs before he moved on. Sweet, I guess. Later, her aura camera goes off again, and this time it's a woman asking for help and saying that she's scared and that she didn't know where she was. Bryce overhears this and comes downstairs and just stares at the phone in shock. You'll see why in a moment. Jaslyn asks if she is okay. The woman said she was at the park and doesn't know what happened and that she can't remember anything, and to please let her in. Bryce grabs the phone and tells her that it's obviously another prank. After the woman disappears, Bryce pulls the aura camera off the door and throws it away and says, enough is enough. The next day she Googles the park the woman at the door had mentioned, and a news article comes up about a woman called Mary Jean Burkett who was unalived there. She was the victim of a hit and run and was killed instantly. The picture in the article was of the same woman that was at her house. She now knows that another ghost was visiting her, but she didn't know why. She knew Mr. Hendricks, but who was this woman? She then asks her husband if he knew her because she didn't, so she can't be there to talk to her. She said that the camera picking up spirits is a common thing and shows him a video online of a guy talking about it, saying that because they use spontaneous parametric down conversion, which is a form of quantum entanglement. That's why they can detect light at only a few photons per pixel, and some people say that by punching into the quantum realm, they act as a magnet for spirits because spirits are basically electromagnetic fields, and that aura security camera is literally an EMF detector for ghosts. Once again, Bryce laughs it off. She goes on to tell him that she lied to him when she said Mr. Hendricks didn't come back, that he did come back and that he was in fact a ghost, so she knows for a fact that the guy in the video isn't talking bullcrap and that it is in fact an EMF detector. She said if Mr. Hendricks came here for a reason, then so did Mary Jean Burkett. She said that Mary Jean wasn't there for her, so he needs to tell her why she is there. He insists that he didn't know. The camera alerts again. It's Mary Jean. After a tense few minutes of Jaslyn demanding that Bryce tell her who she is, he then admitted that he knew her. She was his fiancée. They were together the night she was unalived at the park. He told her that he went to the park to break up with her. She was very upset and walked off, so he drove away. Jaslyn comforts him and asks him to please talk with Mary Jean. She probably wanted to tell him that it wasn't his fault. Mary Jean then appears in their home holding a baby, saying that he was going to be Bryce's son, and tells Bryce to tell Jaslyn the truth. Bryce's whole demeanor changes. He doesn't look sad or scared anymore. He now looks like he can't be bothered and acting like it's just another average normal conversation to have with your wife. He goes on to tell her that Mary Jean was pregnant with his baby the night she was unalived, and they got into an argument because he wanted her to have an abortion, but she wanted to keep the baby. He said she then angrily walked away from him. She didn't see a speeding car approaching on the opposite side of their car and sadly gets hit by the car. The driver takes off. The saddest part is that he could have saved her. As Mary lays there on the road crying in pain with her poor body too broken to move, she begs him to help her. But no, he just stared at her for way too long, locking eyes with the mother of his unborn child while she lay there in agony. He had such a sinister look in his eyes. He then steps on her neck and unalives her. After telling Jaslyn this, he tries to attack her, but Mary Jean stops him and gets her revenge by unaliving him. The man who so cruelly ended her life is no more. A few months later, we now see Jaslyn in her new apartment talking with her building manager. He tells her that he went ahead and installed her Aura camera for her. She gets annoyed because she didn't ask him to do that. He says everyone in the building has one, that it's in the contract because it keeps the insurance rate down. Immediately after he leaves, her Aura camera alerts that someone is at the door. Can you guess who it is? Yes, it's her husband. But he was certainly not like Mr. Hendricks and Mary Jean. Bryce was cursing, shouting, and banging at the door, demanding that Jaslyn let him in. A living nightmare. So that's it. Let me know if you've seen this story before and what you thought of it. Have you ever had a strange or ghostly sighting on your security camera? Let me know if you have. I love hearing about other people's experiences. Until next time, guys. Take care.